So in applying the principles, let's look very briefly at the 5 laws, or really they're just principles themselves. Those are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity.
This is Stay Paid, the marketing podcast that gives listeners a competitive edge to stay motivated, find inspiration, and discover proven real-world tactics from some of the best marketers across the nation.
Welcome to another episode of Stay Paid. I'm Joshua Stike along with Luke Acree. And before we bring on our guest today, we'd love it if you take a minute to subscribe to Stay Paid on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're not already subscribed, while you're there, drop us a review. We'll read it here on the show. This week's featured review comes from Jackie Rowe with Integrity Real Estate out of Maryland. So Jackie says, this is my go-to podcast. I've been an American Lifestyle Magazine client since day one of my real estate journey. My clients love it. I look forward to each episode of the podcast, and check this out, even look forward to the bad dad joke. There you go. Got another dad joke reference. Thank you for all you do to grow my business. You guys rock. Thank you very much, Jackie, for leaving that review. Our guest today, super excited, is Bob Burg. Bob is the author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, with total book sales well over 1 million copies. And I think before the podcast, he mentioned it might be over 2 million copies.
Yes.
Now, he's a speaker, a timeless thought leader, and has been named one of the top 30 leaders in business, with his book, The Go-Giver, being ranked number 10 on Inc. magazine's list of the most motivational books ever written. Bob, honored to have you here on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Josh and Luke, appreciate both of you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are super excited to interview you. We got to give a shout out to Kim Angeli. So Kim Angeli has been an amazing client of ours. We interviewed her on this show. We've done webinars together, so you guys know about her.
I think Kim might be the connector that you've talk about in the book.
I would not doubt that at all.
Yeah.
She's just remarkable.
She really is, and she connected us to you. We are honored to have you. I mean, to sell, I think you said Go-Giver's 1.25 million right now in sales, book-wise.
Yeah.
To sell that many books is
unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. People don't understand with book
you.
sales. I mean, it is insanely hard to sell books. And to do that with a book is unbelievable. So I'd love to just dive right in and ask you, what does it mean to be a go-giver? Like, this took off for you in this book. What does that mean, and how have you seen that concept help businesses grow?
Yeah, so it simply means this, that the person understands that shifting their focus, and this is really where it all begins with the focus, shifting their focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others. So understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of way out there, woo-woo, magical, mystical type of reason. No, just give and do good things. No, nothing like that at all. It's actually very, very rational, very logical when you think about it. When you're that person who can move your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire. When you can move off of yourself and onto solving other people's challenges and problems, when you can move from a focus on yourself to a focus on helping move other people closer to happiness, people feel good about you. They feel great about you, right? They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to be a part of your life, and they want to tell others about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. So, that's really the basic premise, what it's all about.
So talk a little bit about how someone puts that into practice then, because in the book you talk, I think you even say, like, you can think about it all day, but until you actually do it and you actually take action on the practices of being a go-giver. You mentioned like 5 laws. I don't know if you want to get into or kind of go over bullet point style each one of those, but how can someone put that into practice?
Sure. And what you say about taking action is very important. That's why people ask, well, the opposite of a go-giver, is that a go-getter? No, not at all. We love go-getters, because go-getters, just as it says behind, the two of you, go-getters take action. Yeah. Right. They, we all know, the three of us, Ethan, the producer, and everybody watching this, we all know that you can have the best thoughts, the nicest ideas, and the greatest of intent. But unless action is put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. It simply cannot happen, which is why, as you recall, the mentor in the story, Pindar, the main mentor, told the protege, Joe, that the one condition of mentorship was what? That Joe had to apply each law he learned that very day. So we say, be a go-getter, a person of action, and a go-giver, a person absolutely, totally laser focused on providing immense value to others. Be a go-getter and a go-giver. Just don't be a go-taker. Right. And so
it makes so much sense. Every entrepreneur that we've come across that has really, really succeeded, the time from idea to implementation, and I'm holding up my hands for those who are listening audio wise, it's like there's no time in between. The hands are literally together. But for people who don't have success, what happens is they have an idea, and then the time between the idea and implementation, there's such a gap, and they usually fill it with external excuses. I see in the business space people running to operational things. They got to figure out all the operational things before they actually can sell something. But regardless of that, it's like the time from actual idea to implementation needs to be next to nothing, and for success to really happen for people.
Yeah, I think and I first heard Robert Ringer coin this term, a bias toward action, right? And so I think that is. I think you're exactly right. There is a definite bias toward action for successful people, successful entrepreneurs. So in applying the principles, let's look very briefly at the 5 laws, or really, they're just principles themselves. Those are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. Now, the law of value says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, this sounds counterintuitive when you first hear it. Give more in value than I take in payment. That sounds all nicey nice and everything, but it also kind of sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy. How am I supposed to give more in value than I take in payment and survive, never mind thrive, right? So we simply have to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It simply is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth to another person that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did, while you make a very healthy profit. I often give a very basic example. It would be the accountant you hire to do your taxes, and she charges you $1,000. That's her fee, or literally her price. But what value does she provide in exchange? Well, she saves you $5,000 on your taxes that you wouldn't be able to do yourself, because if you're not an accountant. She saves you countless hours of time, which frees you up to be more productive or simply enjoy life more. And she provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So she's given you well over $5,000 in use value in exchange for $1,000 fee or price. She gave you more in value than she took in payment, so you feel great about it. And she also made a very healthy profit because it was worth it to her to exchange her time, her energy, her knowledge, right, for that $1,000 fee. One of my old heroes, Harry Brown, used to say, in any free market-based exchange, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one's forced to do business with anyone else. People do it on their own volition. In any free market-based exchange, there should always be 2 profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. But here's the important part. That this happened not because your accountant was focused on the money she was getting. She was focused on the value she was providing. The money was the result. This is why John David Mann, my awesome co-author and really the lead writer, storyteller, it's why John and I say that money is simply an echo of value, right? It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, meaning that the value must be your focus. You focus on the value you're providing. The money you receive is simply a natural result of that value.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Good. There was this exercise that I did one time that I challenge every business to do if you're a product-based business. So some of you are service-based, some of you are product-based. And even if you're service-based, you have products and stuff probably you offer, is think about all your features of your product. Write down every single feature of what you offer. And then corresponding right next to it, write the value that brings. Because when it's like kind of tapping into what you're saying, which is if you focus through the lens of value, like features tell, value sells, right, is the concept. But if you focus through the lens of value, you now know how to communicate by what the client actually wants to hear and what they're actually receiving from you, not the feature that's part of your tool or product.
Sure. And absolutely true. And even that is still just the intrinsic value of what your product provides. Okay. So in other words, if you're a financial advisor, let's say, and I know you have financial advisor clients, the financial advice is the feature. The benefit is they help people create and manage wealth. Right, give them a legacy to leave and enjoyment in their retirement and some all these great things. But here's the thing: that's still intrinsic to the product or service itself. It's by design what it was supposed to do, and in and of itself doesn't necessarily distinguish them from any other financial advisor or anybody else selling a product or service. That's where, and what happens is if a prospective client cannot distinguish between any two or more salespeople, products, services, whatever, it's always going to come down to who has the lowest price or fee. And unless your last name is Walmart or Amazon.com, right? Trying to make low price your unique selling proposition is not a productive way to do business. It's not. It's first of all, it's not rewarding. It's also not profitable, and it's absolutely not sustainable. When you sell on price, you're a commodity. When you sell on value, you're a resource. So the key is communicating also that extrinsic value, that value over and above the product or service and its features and benefits itself. So how do you do that? Well, the short answer is you become that additional value because they're buying you before they're buying your company, before they're buying your product or service. So how do you do that? Well, the good news is there are dozens, if not hundreds of ways to communicate that additional value, but they tend to come down to what we call the 5 elements of value. And those elements of value are excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation. And to the degree that you and your team can communicate those elements of value from that initial touch point, whether it's an inbound call or inbound from something that content you've put out there, whether it's inbound or whether it's outbound, a phone call or you've met in however that initial introduction has happened, through the relationship building process, the follow-up and follow-through, the sales process, the referral process, to the degree that you're able to communicate those 5 elements of value, that's the degree that you take price and competition out of the picture.
That is so good. That is so good. So talk about the next law.
So the next one is the law of compensation. And this one says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 said to give more in value than you take in payment, law number 2 tells us the more people whose lives you touch with that exceptional value, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. Your accountant, in the first example, she did a wonderful job of giving you more in value than she took in payment. So you feel great about her. You would do business with her again, and you'd probably refer her to others, right? Well, her other clients feel the same way. So our accountant is very quickly amassing an army of personal walking ambassadors. And as she continues to add that kind of exceptional value to the lives of more and more people, her income will continue to grow and grow. In this part of the story, the mentor, Nicole Martin, who we called the CEO, she shared with Joe, the protege, that the law of value represents your potential income, but it's not enough to serve just one person, no matter how much value you provide. Okay. Law number 2 is all about law of compensation, is your actual income, because it's about the number of lives you impact. And that's the key. We could say exceptional value plus significant reach equals very high compensation.
Yeah, it's so good. I love how you use the word impact as well. It's the amount of people you actually impact and actually make a difference in their life.
Yeah. So let's tackle one more law here, because I don't want to give everyone, I don't want to go over everything.
You got to read the book. You got to be reading.
But I do want, because I know we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are in a position where they are attempting to influence another person, right? Whether that's in a service-based sales position, they're in sales, they're in service, they're attempting to help, but they're also attempting to coach and guide and influence. And your third law touches on that, this law of influence idea.
Yeah. The law of influence says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Well, if law number 1 sounded counterintuitive, this one sounds downright counterproductive, if not Pollyanna-ish, right? Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place their interests first, and yet it's absolutely very true. Now, let me clarify and qualify this, if I may. When we say place the other person's interests first, we certainly do not mean that you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply understanding, as Joe, the protege, learned in the story from several of the mentors, the golden rule of business, of sales, what have you, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus, looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. Why is this so important? When I speak at sales conferences, one of the first things I'll say is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Okay. They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or would like the sale to happen. And they're not even going to buy from you just because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because ultimately they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that makes total sense when you think about it. Why would anyone buy from you or from me or from anyone else for any other reason, right? But this is great news for that person who has that entrepreneur or sales professional who has a heart to serve others. When you're truly focused on them, right? When your entire being is all about making their life better through your product, service, and the excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation you communicate, you've created that benevolent context for your success.
It makes so much sense. When you look at your years of doing this, what is the big frustration that you have in looking at businesses or people that are trying to apply your methodology and your framework, but they're misinterpreting? Like, what is the number one fallacy you see people misinterpreting about your principles?
Okay, so that's actually, it's a great question, and it hits a couple different things. So let's go back to the fallacies in a second. First, what I think is most frustrating, not for me, but I think frustrating in that I'd like them to be able to, that I feel badly for them for struggling with it. And that is that when someone really truly believes they're adding value to other people, but they're really not. Because what they're doing is they're adding value as they understand value, not as the other person does. Remember, value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, which means value is always in the eyes of the beholder. And you cannot know what another person values without discovering this. Okay. And until you do, then what you're doing is you're adding value as you would like someone to add value to you. And it's not necessarily the same thing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's so good. It's like the love languages. It reminds me of love languages.
Exactly. Very much so. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Because remember, we all operate from our own set of beliefs, and they're unconscious beliefs. We don't even realize there are beliefs. And we see the world in a certain way. Now, remember, just like in the 5 Love Languages book, we believe that basically everybody else sees the world the same way we do, which makes intuitive sense, by the way. How could it be anything different? It's all we know.
Yeah.
Right. And yet it's not true. They see it their way. They value different things. Different things bring them happiness than do us. So that's the biggest frustration I think people have, in that they think they're giving value and doing what the book says when really they're not giving value from the other person's point of view. As far as fallacies go, well, there's a lot of them. First, I think just with the term go-giver, that kind of, if someone doesn't read the book and they just see the term, it sounds like you're just giving things away, or giving yourself away, as though you're not profitable. Well, go-givers tend to be the most profitable, because go-givers are selling on high value, not low price, right? And or someone might think, well, doesn't it mean being taken advantage of? Absolutely not. Again, there's nothing about being a go-giver that's congruent with being a doormat or being self-sacrificial. If someone's constantly being taken advantage of as a pattern, I'm not saying every so often, like it's going to happen in life, right? Unless you never leave the house. But other than that, at some point, someone's going to take advantage of you. But if it's a pattern in someone's life, they need to know it's not because they're a nice person or they're a giving person. It's because they're doing things in a certain way that creates the environment for them to be taken advantage of. And they need to first understand that and be conscious of that. They need to take the unconscious, which is what that always is, and turn it into something conscious. Only when a problem is conscious do we have an opportunity to go about correcting that. Right.
Yes.
So I mean, I'd say those are sort of, some of the things when people say, go giver, and they kind of misinterpret that a little bit.
It's interesting. It's like, I think about my journey so far, and because we're in the real estate insurance, financial advising space, and many others, it's a big networking type space, and, relationship driven business space. And I find that one of the best ways you can support, or you can give to people, is by just showing up for them, just supporting them. I think people underestimate in the giving that it's like, John Ruhlin's a great one to listen to for the gift side of giving.
You know
what I mean? Like because he's amazing. He wrote the book Giftology. And
it's a good book.
Yeah, we had him on the show. He's pretty incredible, his thought process.
Good guy.
But I really see a lot of power in just being there for people. Like, I think we underestimate as business professionals just the power of supporting and showing up for people and being there and supporting what they do and what they're into. And so your kind of thought process on we tend to give based upon what we want to receive is so valid, versus thinking through, what does this person want? And how can I show up for them and support them in their desires and what they want? I think it's so powerful. And Joe Campert, he's a guy in insurance. If you're in insurance, follow him, the Insurance Syndicate Group. This guy does that. He just gives and shows up for people all day long. And you can see it, and you see it in his relationships and his business. Guess what? Exactly what you're saying, Bob, is booming. Like, it's booming. And it's just and he doesn't even try. He doesn't try to sell anything. It's just, you just want to do business. You want to be around him because of his energy, and he just cares about you, and he's just giving back to you and supporting you. It's pretty interesting just seeing. I'm thinking about my own journey and going, this plays out so true, but it's undervalued. You know why? Because principles they feel almost mystical. They feel intangible. Like when you talk about influence or value, it's like it feels like almost like intangible. Like how do I get my hands around it to wake, like telling somebody you got to make 100 phone calls tomorrow, that feels tangible. Very tangible, right? Hey, wake up, make 100 phone calls. But the principles, I see them as kind of like you got to build your house on these foundations. And when you build your house, your business on this foundation, it won't blow over, right? And you'll build a structure that lasts. But if you build it on the wrong foundation, whether it's material gain or whatever, it's going to crash. That's what's going to happen.
Would love to ask you, Bob, because we tend to ask some people this, but you're an author, right? So you've written multiple books, sold a couple million copies. What books had the biggest impact on your life and why? Is there one?
That's it's a great question. It's a tough question for me because there's so many that have impacted me so much. It's hard to really narrow them down, but let me try and just kind of do the best I can. I think a book like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie has got to be one that has just added immeasurably to my life in terms of, now I was very fortunate to grow up with wonderful parents and a dad who his people skills were as good as Carnegie's, believe me. Only with Dad, it was very natural. He just had this way with people, a genuine interest in the other person. Yeah, and I got to observe that. When I read Carnegie's book, though, it kind of showed me why. Dad was so successful with people, you know what I'm saying? And so I can't tell you how many times, I've been through Carnegie's book or just I'll pick it up and just turn to any chapter and, it's always exactly what I needed to hear, Then you've got books like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Then you got a book like Peace, Power, and Plenty.
Now that one is marked up. I see all those.
I've never heard of that one, Peace, Power, and Plenty.
So it was written in 1909 by Orson Swett Marden. He was, a lot of people consider him the father of the modern day personal development movement. He was the founder of Success Magazine.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And this is one of his most famous books. What I did in this is I couldn't even write on the book itself. It's just too precious a book, so what I did is I just wrote notes on the yellow highlighted parts. Yeah, but what's interesting is like every page has these just gems of wisdom, so
I'm gonna have to pick that book up. I've never heard of that book.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's another book.
A rarity. I usually have heard of these books, and that's awesome.
Most people have not heard of that book, and I hadn't until about 20 years ago. A guy by the name of Danny Cox, who was a speaker and former fighter pilot, he turned me on to this book. He'd asked me, had I ever heard of Orson Swett Marden? I said, no. And he said, well, get this book. And then I started studying Marden and finding out more about him and everything. So another book that's made a huge difference in my life is a book that was published in 1960, and the title is Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And it's really the first book that I read that showed me how our beliefs dictate our lives. And again, our beliefs are unconscious, and our basic belief system is simply the way we see the world, the way we understand the world. And if we believe a certain thing about life, whether it's about money, whether it's about relationships, whether it's about health, whether it's about what have you, that's how we're going to operate, because that's the frame, almost the matrix, if you will, if you remember the first movie that we're living in. Personally, I call it our unconscious operating system. And, most people grow up, live lives, think they're operating out of conscious choice, when really they're operating within a very defined matrix of choices of what they're right. And, but we don't know that because it's unconscious. That's and unless you get plugged in or get the plug out, I can't remember what they did in the matrix, but whatever you get,
get unplugged. Yeah.
Get unplugged. Right.
And take the red pill, take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Let's get red pilled. Right. Then, you don't know. And so Maxwell's book, or Maltz's book, Dr. Maltz's book, is the one that showed me that you can never achieve more than your most limiting belief.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So there's all sorts of great books. So
I'm
again,
glad I
it's
asked.
hard.
Like, those were two that I've never heard of.
Yeah, I want to read those.
Super happy that we asked. Bob, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know you have your website that you want to mention and also a daily impact email that people can sign up for.
Yeah. Burg, BURG.com. I'm a simple guy. I keep things simple. So Burg.com. And while there, people can subscribe to my daily impact emails. I say daily, it's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And it's a little shot of inspiration, how to, and whatever in the morning to kind of make your day just a little bit, as I like to say, more better.
Nice. Awesome. Love it. And definitely pick up the book, The Go-Giver. It is a super simple, it's a very easy read. It's parable style, right? So it's kind of the story of this guy, Joe, who meets this guide, and he takes him through and walks him through these 5 laws. And you see it all play out in the different examples. And it's really an easy read. I think it's something you could read multiple times and take a lot away from it. So
again, credit to John David, man, for being just a wonderful writer. I lucked out when I got to collaborate on this with him.
Yeah, I listened to the Q&A, I think, with you guys at the end of the audio book as well, and got to hear some of your back and forth on how the book came to be. So that was really insightful. Well, thank you again for being here, and thank you so much for listening. You can dive deeper into this episode, get the links that we mentioned there over at staypaidpodcast.com, as well as the video of this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to show your support, head on over to Apple Podcasts, drop us a 5-star review and a comment. And the best way to show your support is simply to share this episode with a friend. If you want to get hold of me or Luke, you can email us at podcast@remindermedia.com, or you can find us on social. We are at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, I'm Luke Acree. Bob, thank you so much. It is an honor. Such good stuff, such good wisdom. I'm definitely going to check out those books. My action item for all of you listening to this, because we want to give you an action item to take away, is you have to be the go-giver, right? And go get that book, read that book, be the go-giver. But, to break it down even more tactically is, do you know what your relationships value? Or are you constantly just trying to connect based upon what you value? Do you know what they value? And maybe you can't do it for all 100 people or 500 people in your database right now. Pick 10 people that are your closest relationships that should be your walking ambassadors, as Bob said. And what do they value? What do they need in their life? And how do you show up for them and give immensely to them? Remember, the difference between top producers and mediocre producers in every single business is top producers take action. Take action on that today.